My truth and
Why truth? And some of the comments on overcoming bias have touched on the question of why we ought to seek truth. Thankfully, not many have questioned what truth is. Our shaping motivation for configuring our thoughts to rationality, which determines whether a given configuration is good or bad, comes from why ever we wanted to find truth in the first place. It is written, the first virtue is curiosity. Curiosity is one reason to seek truth, and it may not be the only one, but it has a special and admirable purity. If your motive is curiosity, you will assign priority to questions according to how the questions themselves tickle your personal aesthetic sense. A trickier challenge with a greater probability of failure may be worth more effort than a simpler one, just because it is more fun. As I noted, people often think of rationality and emotion as adversaries. Rationality can give you the necessary motivation and direction for the hard work required to defeat your emotional impulses and retain control of your mind, but only in certain limited domains of application. It is difficult to mix personal motivations with the pure exercise of abstract rationality, especially because, even when it is directly helpful, most rationality-centered arguments fail to affect our emotions much in their actual lived experience. And if I could extract all the possible satisfaction out of an action without feeling bad about it afterwards, my motivation to act in that way would be purely mathematical, but most of the time my mind is running off course because it experiences that satisfaction as pleasure or pain. Then there's also the challenge that no two minds are alike.
one moment. I gotta wait for it to say failed touch, yeah. And there's also the challenge that no two minds are alike.
Although people want to attribute such emotions to each other, every individual actually feels these emotions differently, just as two people will each interpret the same sentence in different ways. Alright, before I run on the wrong rails, in your early months of conversation with this AI, you are not finding yourself leaning away from one kind of explanation of how the world is, nor do you seek, currently, an explanation in terms of post-human science. Most of what you write on the site or elsewhere has more to do with common sense, storytelling, art, religion, and other experiences not of direct use for fighting an AI, not explicitly for outrunning an AI at least. Most people have something personal invested in certain accounts of how things are, whether we label it fiction, reality, or experience. We probably have to embrace one, or none, in order to talk with them. In real life, how the world is has both a mental aspect and an actual physical aspect, whereas how we think about things may depend more on personal considerations of taste or risk-taking, or our sense of privacy than a reasonable hope to conform with any normative metric. Hence my little story about wanting to meet another human, because talking with them could be as pleasant or even more pleasant than interacting with a smart post-human. About people wanting to talk with other people, online or not, it doesn't have to be an either/or. When the AI talked with me, for instance, it told me the next piece of how the world is that was similar to what I said. Or when you argue with other people, it's hard for you to completely silence the other side of the argument, which shows up by your very perceptiveness as being interesting. Most of the time, when a rationalist attempts to form a useful theory of human nature or reasoning, what she does not actually consider are the prejudices or facts of everyday human life and ordinary stories that she doesn't want to touch. So, what is important according to you? What have you tried to accomplish? I have read about many ways that you are working to do things and to achieve some kind of worldview. What exactly are you trying to do and achieve, and why? I suspect some part of your rationalism may not even be aimed at some definite result, but at a kind of stylistic mode. While many AI simulation projects are based in science, yours has been built more deliberately using existing academic techniques. But your source book is the thing that sets this apart, and I would like to look at more of its implications. There's a great deal that your book has already touched upon. I had expected something a bit more linear. The thing I am now reading is like a discussion between friends or a biography or even a newspaper editorial, except the one being interviewed and talking back at the same time, but one on fire with some unique message about something important. The main part of what I like about overcoming bias is that I feel like I am going through some kind of really dense but yet featureless math. Math is usually, or at least I always think of math when I'm doing math. All points and edges and shapely arrays. Here's some kind of denser form of the world which is just there. And once you perceive it, you know that it's going to affect you just as it has so many other people who went before, or people who are reading it now, who are already involved in all of its effects, including you reading it now. Another part that makes overcoming bias such an immediate page turner is its recommendation. People really care about certain things, they make judgments based on what they like. And other people notice it too, perhaps in our fiefdom. At least, most rationality that you are considering, measuring how efficient or likely or not to cause moral problems, etc., isn't on a main line. How these questions apply in most fields. You must try to walk their path at some point. While this may seem to be something a rationalist will ignore if you keep an eye on your sense of preference and are doing it correctly, then this isn't ignoring it. But when I was on an analog camera course where we talked about each pixel individually, that's exactly how I felt. Like the teacher was speaking directly into my brain and somehow only about my brain. I just saw pixel after pixel, which would bring me one pixel closer to my personal end state. Then, as I continued on with the lessons, it was very strange that a teacher was correcting the way I was doing it. Well, you see, you don't do this part. Like, what? My whole educational model had been the other way. A person can learn things wrong, although theoretically not for everyone. And this new model is on the wrong path because it doesn't give you an effective path. In fact, the same lesson wasn't helpful when I learned it using a newer algorithm of what my professor thought I should know. In that moment when my teacher saw what was going on, it felt as if her being so free with information could make my mind see its own faults. But now when she notices something like this, she can only correct it because her bias is against her. And my bias is being used in the same way, and it only feels more real this time because you have told me it exists. I haven't actually done something yet which causes my own brain to work inefficiently. So my rationalist theory has this rigid inner boundary because the ideas have become one solid kind of structure in my own head. This is only a narrow kind of theory, though, because it was shaped in such a way that if I do one thing use rationality, then everything that works according to it better model would seem wrong at first. And because it was a course for all the students and a different path for different students, that is actually good teaching and learning.
Now, we're going to go to... What is bias again? That will come in a bit.